A&B Properties is Quincy's largest apartment rental company with hundreds of units available. They offer short-term and long-term rentals with 1 up to 4 bedroom apartments. A&B Properties meets the needs of its tenants with care, compassion, and a quality of service that exceeds expectations. A&B Properties also has a convenient tenant app for you to do your payments or make repair requests. Give them a call today. A&B Properties, 217-919-8080, Quincy.
You know, your voice is kind of leaving.
Sultry today.
So you know what's going to happen?
What's up?
You know how you're kind of known as the best looking educator in Quincy?
I did not know that.
That's true.
Oh, thank you.
It's true.
Thanks.
Like the last time we did a podcast on Facebook, it was outrageous.
All right.
You know, all of these like ex-students saying, like just melting. So you want to talk right into that.
Right into that? Get right up on it?
So you don't really know that much about microphones.
I don't.
So
are we on? Are we doing this? Is this happening?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I never know when we start, you know? I never know when we start.
Well, so obviously this is Mike Shull, the best looking educator in Quincy in the public schools.
That's meaningful.
I'm going to say in the private schools too.
Oh, wow. Hey.
I'm going to say
Mark McDowell will be devastated.
He's a close second.
He is. He's a good looking man.
He's a close. And then maybe Coach Cannell's a close third.
So. Yeah.
So quick shout out to Hank Richard. It's his birthday. I just want to say that.
I know, Hanky. I said something inappropriate to him earlier via text that I'd repeat, but I know we like to keep it PG-13. But yeah, Hank Richard, my man. He's going to be in town this weekend.
Oh, good. I hope I see him.
Yeah.
You know, in the green room, we were talking, David Adam and Bob Goff were talking about that roundabout.
Yeah.
And I know it went from $2 million to 3 to 4. Now it's $5 million. Yeah. So I think we should pull the trigger at $10 million.
Just wait.
Just wait until it gets
Give it 3 years. And
wait.
It'll be there.
Yeah.
You know, I've never. Growing up, it was always 24th and Harrison was always the one that they were threatening to put a stoplight in at. And for both of them, I don't think I've really ever seen the concern. Now, I'm not like a sporting guy, so I imagine like after a game at Flint or something, it's probably kind of crazy there. But like I'm a Quincy, and I would just know to go,
You would
go the other way.
Don't go that way.
I wouldn't go that way.
Why go in that direction?
Yeah,
because everybody's going to go in that direction.
But I've never encountered a wait at that. I'll tell you, the number one intersection in town that I've spent the most time at has got to be 18th and State.
Oh,
without a doubt,
18th and State.
That's the one.
Yeah, that's where TCBY is. So you've got the people kind of like pulled over on the side because they need their frozen yogurt ASAP.
Yeah, and you know what? They queue up really nicely. I always say in my classes that to me the ultimate hallmark of society, of a civilization, is when I pull up to that little pedestrian crossing in front of QMG, and when someone stops for a pedestrian trying to cross, that's step one. But then when the pedestrian hurries across, that is step two. And that to me we're at the apex of civilization right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I will stop, but if you hurry, now we're like, yeah, mind blown.
What happens if the pedestrian who crosses does like the hand wave, like the acknowledgement that, oh my goodness,
that's nice too.
You stopped.
That's nice too.
And then the driver puts up the hand.
Yeah.
Now we're
that's nice. It's when people when you let people cross and they slow down, that I just want to move out into the wilderness. Yeah. Right. Just leave it all behind.
Well, speaking of the wilderness.
Yeah. Coming out of the wilderness, moving.
So, one of the reasons, Mike Shull, why you and I are here today is because we kind of want to just have a chat about all of the missing, I shouldn't say missing, all of the moving pieces of the world's populations. Yeah. And I've heard that there has not been such a mass migration since World War II quite like this. Yeah. And some people are saying it's climate change, and some people are they're giving all of these reasons, and we can kind of explore these things. Yeah. And I think
the movement of people is history. That is like what history is all about. I mean, last time I was here, we talked about Ukraine. I mean, that has everything to do with the migration of people. I mean, hell, like, Rome fell apart because of immigrants. I think you could make the argument. I mean, whether they were invading, whether or not they came with, swords drawn or hands out, it was ultimately the tax on the system that kind of broke Rome. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what's happening right now, but I think it is kind of important to kind of just like we kind of did last time, to kind of go back in time a little bit, look at how we ended up where we are and kind of how things have changed. So I mean, if you want me to, I'll run you through a little bit of, so my emphasis, my degree in history is colonial America. So I spent a lot of time thinking about colonial America. That's kind of where I started. And right off the bat, before the colonies are ever even a thing, we look at Britain, and Britain is a mercantile country, as they all are at that time. Really what it comes down to in the 1500s is all the Protestants and all the Catholic countries are pissed off at each other, and everybody is trying to bolster their navy so that they can dominate. And the way that you do that is by exporting more than you import, right? And so we put tariffs on imports, right? And we subsidize exports. The government will just straight up help you. And one of the ways that they will help you is by only letting in people who can contribute and making it difficult for people to become full-fledged citizens of the place. So, in this instance, we're talking about England, Britain, but it would be the same pretty much anywhere in Europe. And so all of these places also, they need natural resources. England is a powerful country, but it's not exactly resource rich. So the big things that they're after, like agricultural goods. I mean, around the end of the 1700s, they're going to be after everything because it's the Industrial Revolution. But also they want timbers for ships. And that's a tough thing. Old growth forests that have not been decimated yet, that have not even been carved into. That's the big thing. And so Britain hits the jackpot with, North America. They've started these colonies. They've got all this going on. And so they're trying to maintain this favorable balance of trade. And in fact, in England, some of the stuff that they would do, some of the limiting stuff would be you couldn't own land if you weren't a citizen. You couldn't leave things like title or property to your kids if you weren't a citizen. And they had laws by which you could become a citizen, which is naturalization, which obviously we have today, but they were arduous. On top of all of that, they need to put people in these colonies. I always compare the colonies to we're always talking about stuff like that at the beginning of the year. And it's like the lunch table, right? You get to Mela, my kid is at junior high, and that was the big concern of hers, finding a lunch table. And so once you get this lunch table, you have to hold on to it. But you don't need everybody sitting at the lunch table to hold on to it. Just a few people can hold on to it. So some people go and get their food and the rest of them kind of stay there. So you just have to, if you're Britain and you have a colony, you have to put British people in this British colony to hold it, right? And so that's what colonization was, how it was done. But when you don't have that many people who are willing, all the wealthy people, they don't want to go over to this place. Can you imagine going somewhere where there's literally nothing? So the thing that they really end up turning to, and I think Australia oftentimes gets this, but people don't realize that this is really the American colonies also, is criminals. So for instance, in Britain in the 1600s, if you were convicted of a crime and the sentence was death, you could choose to go to the colonies instead. And they call it transportation. And in fact, that's what they call it, yeah. So in 1717, there's something called the Transportation Act where they just streamline the whole process. They cease giving you the option. And they're just hey, guess what? We caught you stealing. You're going to Virginia. And that was it. And generally when you went over there, you went over as what they called an indentured servant. I think anybody that's taken a history class in America knows what indentured servitude was. You came over, you served your time, you did labor, and then eventually you were free. And a lot of times that came with something good. Sometimes it would come with something not that great, like a suit of clothing, but other times it would come with land, so you'd actually get land. And then, to put it in perspective, in the 1600s, a half of everyone coming over to the English colonies were indentured servants. By the time the revolution breaks out, less than 2% of the colonies are indentured servants. So what takes their place?
So this is in between. Yeah. What does take the
What
place?
takes the indentured servant's place?
Oh, slaves.
There you go. Yeah. And I don't know that slaves really fit in the immigration discussion all that well because it's kind of a band apart. It's kind of its own thing. They didn't have a choice. They were never going to be freed. Their kids were going to be slaves. So that's kind of maybe something for another time. But so
Maybe almost that's almost forced immigration.
Absolutely.
Like a very dirty part.
Yeah,
of immigration.
we might compare that with I guess you could compare it to maybe refugeeism or something like that, which actually I think that there's a lot to be said about refugees, and we'll get to that. And I'll breeze through a little bit more of this real quick, and then we can kind of talk about some of that stuff. But so, the English colonies go through this period called salutary neglect, where things are going great. And England is getting everything that they want out of these colonies. They're getting agricultural stuff, and they're getting timbers, and they're getting all this stuff. And so they don't need to interfere. So all of the colonies are handling immigration and naturalization themselves. And let me tell you what, they're pretty exclusive. If you want to move to Virginia and you want to become a citizen, you're going to pay a head tax, meaning just for walking through the door, you're going to pay money. You're going to take a test about what you know mostly about the Protestant faith. If you're Catholic, it's not going to work out very well for you pretty much anywhere in the English colonies, So they're very sort of choosy. But then the French and Indian War breaks out. And the French and Indian War is just basically the American theater of a war that's already going on in Europe called the 7 Years' War. And it's over a ton of stuff that's really almost impossible to explain, but a lot of it boils down to Protestant versus Catholic in a very roundabout way. But it has to do with succession in Austria and Prussia and all this stuff. So ultimately, it's an expensive war. British people are going into the backcountry. They're getting into conflict with the Indians and the French people, and it causes a war. So now the war is over, and Britain is in debt. So now they want to reinsert themselves into the lives of the colonists. Okay, and so now instead of a place like Virginia being able to handle their immigration, now Britain wants to handle it. And in fact, they even cite this in the Declaration. They say that basically in the Declaration of Independence, one of the things that they cite is that the king is interfering with the naturalization process in the colonies. And they're all bent out of shape about it. Well, long story short, by the time the revolution comes around, there's about 2.2 million Americans. A lot of them are immigrants. And now there's this big decision that has to be made because we were England and now we're not. And all these people are standing here. And so there's this question of how do you become a citizen? What do you do? Do I just click my heels together and now I'm an American? Do I even have the choice? A remarkable number of people weren't in favor of the war. Maybe 40% of Americans were patriots, but pretty much everyone else was either a loyalist or they were independent. So, they developed the three methods by which you can become an American citizen. And they're still the ones that we have today. One is by the soil. You're born on American soil. Number two is by blood. Your parents go on vacation. They're in Mexico. You're born. You're still a citizen, unless it's under strange circumstances.
Right.
And then lastly, and this was the most important in the Revolutionary era, you pledge allegiance. So you say, I want to become a citizen. And so they put all that in place. And they even make big decisions about what offices can you hold if you're foreign born, or even if you're a naturalized citizen. Really the only one that you can't hold is president, and then later they make it vice president also.
Is this back when pledges of allegiance were a really big thing?
Yeah.
Because I think, blood oaths and a pledge of allegiance, I mean, part of that is do they add any immigration policies? Were any of it part of adding to the military? Did they force anyone to fight?
Look, impressment happened for sure, but not nearly as much as Britain did. But there were a lot of people, a lot of foreigners were just willing to fight because they you have to understand the Enlightenment is going on. Mm-hmm. people are reading all of these books and having all these new ideas about what liberty is and what it means to not live under a monarchy. And lots of people are just willingly coming here, which was another big thing that kind of opened people's minds. Like, the Marquis de Lafayette, Washington's right-hand guy, like, does he not deserve a place at this table? Thaddeus Kosciuszko, like one of the, I guess, like the OGs of the Army Corps of Engineers, does he not? So there's like a ton of examples. The Baron von Steuben basically trained the American soldiers at Valley Forge. So there were all of these foreigners that came here. So a Pledge of Allegiance was really like, at a minimum, just, look, you've already proven yourself. So especially if you fought. So tell us that you're in and we'll let you in. And I mean, they did have like residency requirements in the aftermath. I think like in 1790, it was 2 years. In 1795, it was 5 years. But then John Adams famously passes the Alien and Sedition Acts, which is really why John Adams doesn't get a second term. It's really unpopular. And really all it is a way for him to put in jail reporters that he doesn't agree with.
Is this John Adams or John Quincy Adams?
John Adams.
John Adams.
And a way for him to kick out people, to deport people that were immigrants that were doing things that he didn't want.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So there are like residency requirements. So I mean, and there's a million things, a million of those all throughout the history of the country. By the time we get to the Civil War, though, we see something new brewing. And we see the rise of nativists, people who are now saying, look, I've been here for 5 generations, even I've been here for 2 generations. I don't like these new people coming in. They're taking, and this is going to sound familiar because this is the argument that you hear today, they're taking jobs. They're outcompeting me economically. I mean, to put it in perspective, New York City in 1855 is 51% foreign born. The state of California is 63% foreign born.
Whoa.
So these nativists are on the rise. Have you ever heard of like the Know Nothing Party? They formed around this whole idea.
Yeah.
Right? One of the big things, and once again, you hear this today, is is it going to change the culture? American culture at this time is relatively homogenous. I mean, when people started moving to the States from like Southern and Eastern Europe, people were going, oh my God. It was like a big thing. So we were heterogeneous, but we weren't nearly as much as we are, today. So the nativists were really concerned about economic things, but more than anything, the cultural, the religious, the linguistic. Once again, like Catholics didn't fare all that well.
No.
And they don't for a long time, but that's just because...
They still don't.
Well, I mean, in Quincy, I think you're all right.
Yeah, in Quincy, you're okay.
But the big reason is just because this was a British colony. And I mean, if you go back to the 1500s, man, the Protestants and the Catholics did not get along.
No, not at all.
You watching
It's
Shogun
bad.
right now? Shogun on
No,
FX?
no.
God, check that out.
No, I will check that out.
so killer.
But real quick, when
Yeah.
you're talking about like the natives in New York City, you said 51% were foreign born.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that movie There Will Be Blood by Daniel Day-Lewis?
Yeah.
Does that kind of encapsulate? I mean, that's probably a lot of artistic license there.
Well, you're thinking Daniel Day-Lewis. You're thinking of Gangs of New York.
Oh, then what's
Gangs of New
York?
York?
That's what it is.
Is where the nativists.
That's what
the
it
natives
is.
are against the immigrants for sure.
And they fight in the 6 corners or
yes.
whatever. Okay,
Yeah, the 5 corners.
5 corners.
Yeah, they do not get along.
You
for
clearly
sure.
know this movie better than
Well,
I do.
I mean, I was going to reference it because it's maybe the only like popular culture thing that I can think of that actually illustrates this idea, which I think like a lot of Americans think that like the immigration question is a new one, but it's not. Like these same exact concerns have been going on forever. I think what the new thing is, I think why the game has changed is because I feel like there was, even though this was politicized, even though immigration has always been politicized, I feel like in the past there was a real feeling that the politicization of it all was in the best interests of the American citizen. I feel like where we're at now is that people don't feel that way. And I'm not necessarily speaking for myself, although I do have feelings on it. But I think, if we look back to why England was limiting immigration, it was to strengthen the hand of their citizens. But I don't know that what's going on today is strengthening anybody's hands, you know?
Well, I mean, I can't imagine how it would be. But so politically right now, there's a bill going on right now to, quote unquote, maybe do some mitigation to either slow down the immigration, the leaks through the border.
Yeah.
And then in addition, giving money to, I think, is it Ukraine and Israel? I mean, I don't know all the different bills that are on the table.
Yeah.
But what's happening is it's one of these omnibus bills again, where they
Yes.
just throw in all of this
Yes.
stuff. So they're calling it a border bill, but really it's a fight over.
It's 1,000 things.
It's a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
So there isn't just one border bill by itself that says yes or no should the United States close its southern border, even like a 6-month moratorium, a year.
And both parties do this without a doubt, where they go, all right, we want a bill that says that stealing is bad, but also you have to give money to X, Y, and Z. And then the other party doesn't pass it, and they go, oh, so you like stealing, you know? And that's the whole, I don't even think that they care about the thing that they're trying to pass. They just want the other party to say no so that they can go, oh, I see, you know?
Right.
You know, and that'll drive you nuts. I mean, I think that we're probably in agreement that like bills should just be one thing.
It should just be one thing.
Just do the one thing.
And then
make
talk
it short.
about it.
Someone can read it, you know, easily.
A 2-pager.
A 2-pager. So simple.
It's not difficult.
It's not.
So what else you got with the history of?
Look, let's jump forward a little bit. I think because this is Quincy history here. World War I. You know, Quincy is a town of, you know, by and large German immigrants. You know, tons and tons of German immigrants. So World War I breaks out, and that really changes the fabric of Quincy. You've got all these things like, what was it? The Turnverein Fraternal Society. So that's a German name. They changed their name to the Turner Society. That's where Turner Hall comes from. That's where they met. Oh. German Methodist Church, you know, changed its name to Kentucky Street Methodist Church, and all of the German books in the library. They have a big German book burning, right on the other side of Washington Park. Public schools that still taught lessons in German, no more. People changed their name. Honestly, my dad and I were doing some research a couple summers ago, where we were looking at some stuff in the history of our family, and we noticed that they started changing the spelling of the name. Shull, you know, they dropped the C, and we were wondering if maybe that was associated with maybe World War I and World War II, because there was a lot of that. But definitely in Quincy, Germanness suddenly became something that you didn't want to necessarily have on display.
Can I jump in with one little weird factoid as you're drinking your zombie dust? Oh, by the way, do you know why I'm not having some of that gorgeous, beautiful zombie dust? I'm getting a colonoscopy tomorrow.
Oh my God, that's right. Is it tomorrow?
It's tomorrow. And
Speaking
right
of
after
Hank,
this pod,
you guys
speaking
were
of Hank,
guilting me into believing that I need to get one. Which
and we could talk about that at the end.
Listen.
But yeah, so after this podcast, I'm going to take 3 Dulcolax and start pounding Miralax.
Let me tell you something.
It's going to be fantastic.
Let me tell you something kind of dark that my dad told me. Actually, my mom told me it was about my dad. He's just turned 75, right? When you get a colonoscopy when you're 75, they tell you that's your last colonoscopy.
Oh, jeez.
we don't need to see you anymore.
Well,
because, you know, we only see you every 10 years or so. And so, you know, they're statistically.
At the end of this podcast.
Which he's going to live forever, but, you know, still.
I'm going to playfully guilt you into getting one.
Oh, God.
But no, so there are 2 German names in Quincy, okay, that I'm going to talk about. One is Giesing.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I added Giesing to my name back in 2010 or something like that. Because I was born Francis Joseph Murphy.
Yeah.
You know, super, you know, I'm like half, you know, Irish Republican Army and
to honor, I won't even say stepdad, to honor your adopted father, so to speak.
Oh, yeah,
I'm kind of big about that terminology with Mayla. I don't like it when people say stepdad. She's not my stepkid. I raised her.
Oh.
She's mine. You know what I mean?
I would never.
Well, you know, I know you wouldn't, but sometimes, you know, it happens.
Well, right. Well, of course.
So I'm sensitive to that terminology.
Well, yeah. So
Stepdad is like, hey, man, your mom's pretty hot, so I guess I'm going to be around, you know? That's stepdad, you know?
I might get you football for Christmas.
Right, maybe. We'll see how this goes.
Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
If you behave. But no, so these two names, Giesing
Yeah.
and Geisy.
Yeah.
So Geisy in Quincy, that's a very well-known, popular name.
Sure.
And Giesing is maybe not as much, maybe not as popular. But if you take a look at the spellings, so Giesing,
Yeah.
Giesing.
Yeah.
So, and then you've got Geisy, which is Gei. So evidently, in the German language, the first vowel after the consonant is silent, and you pronounce the next one.
Say that before. Yeah,
So like
I've heard you say it.
G-I-E, ignore the I, pronounce the E. So
Yeah.
Giesing.
Yeah.
And then like, like for example, like Geisy Plumbing. Okay, very, very well-known name here in Quincy. You ignore the E and pronounce the I. So that's why it's Geisy. So anyway,
That's a
that's
really
my contribution.
good, like that's one of those rules that I've heard you say a number of times that I never remember. You know, and I'm like struggling when I'm like reading off my rosters at the beginning of the year. I'm like, what did Frank say?
Yeah.
And I never remember.
Ignore the first vowel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, look, I got like 3 more things here.
No, please.
World War II breaks out. You know, I'll tell you one other thing. The Great Depression. So the Great Depression is one of these moments where all of a sudden there aren't even jobs for Americans. So what do? They start deportations. And really, the big group that they were deporting, because one of the things that happens after World War I is not only are we taking immigrants, but we start to impose quotas. We start to say, well, we'll take 350,000 Southern Europeans. We'll take blah, blah, blah. We'll take this. We'll take that. They placed no quotas on people from the Western Hemisphere. So when that happens, the number of Canadian and specifically Mexicans that start coming into the United States balloons, okay? And, in the Southwest, like migrant labor had always kind of been a thing. Like people from Mexico would come over and they would work during the harvest and then they would go back to Mexico. So this kind of back and forth across the border was a pretty common thing. But once they stopped with the quota thing, people start streaming in. Well, during the Great Depression, there really aren't jobs for anybody. So they start a deportation. They end up deporting over 1 million Mexicans. Come to find out, something like 60% of them were American citizens.
Oh, jeez.
Right. So they're just rounding up Mexicans and just driving them across the border and then just basically dumping them off. Never before, unless you had really gotten into trouble, had there been like deportations, on a mass scale. World War II breaks out, and now we have another group that really wants in. And there's a pretty good moral reason to do so, and that's Jews from Germany. This is a little despicable moment in American history. Our quota of Germans was something like 350,000, right? In like 1942, where we damn well knew that the Holocaust was happening, we ended up taking I think it was like 250,000 German immigrants. So we actually left 100,000 on the table for some reason. There's a story about this ship called the St. Louis. The St. Louis comes from Germany. It's got just under 1,000 German Jews on it. They try and dock in Cuba. Cuba says no. They try and dock in the United States. The United States says no. They try and dock in Canada. Canada says no. They end up going back to Europe. And something like a third of them end up dying in the Holocaust. So there's definitely some dark moments in there.
After
without
they
a doubt.
go back?
After they go back.
They go back, then they go.
Yeah, can you imagine? Can you imagine not just jumping off the boat? It's like, good Lord. But so, lastly, and this kind of sums up the whole thing, right? We arrive at this moment where they start something called the Bracero initiative, basically, the Bracero program. It's like the 50s. And basically, it's an opening of the borders to allow Mexican migrants to go back and forth, to work during harvest time, and then to go back. And it kind of, it helps to pave the way to become a citizen, but it also gives you all of the documentation that you need in order to not be harassed. So the idea that what this would do is it would force people that were already here to go back down to the border, leave, and come back in to get the paperwork that they needed in order to be a registered sort of documented person. Who do you think, what president do you think has deported the most illegal immigrants?
In modern times?
Ever. It'll blow your mind.
Barack Hussein.
Good guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Barack Obama.
Yeah.
They used to call him the deporter in chief.
Yeah.
I find that pretty mind-blowing, honestly.
It is
You know?
it is mind-blowing.
Deported more illegals than anyone else. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think now, you know, because there's a lot of other stuff that happens. I mean, in 1986, they pass a bill that basically, like, anybody, if you had been here for like 2 or 3 years, they make you a citizen. So it gives something like 3 million people, I think, citizenship. But it also penalizes businesses that hire illegals. So that's kind of a transformative moment also. So, you know, I think like the flip side to all of the immigration talk is why are they coming here? So like, why are people trying to get across the border? Like, do you have any feelings on this?
Yeah. I mean, I think they're being either invited or told to come over. That's what I think. 'Cause I don't think it's okay. So one thing that I never really used to believe is in conspiracy theory. That's not something I really. I mean, it was fun to talk about them.
Yeah.
But after COVID taught me that if you don't think that something's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Right.
And the reason why it took COVID was because I feel like I've been born during the long nap.
Yeah.
So I wasn't alive during the Holocaust. I wasn't alive during World War II. I mean, my biological father got drafted to Vietnam.
Yeah.
You know, forced. He fought in Vietnam for 1 day less than a year, and then came back over. You know, and then all kind of hell broke loose. But in my life,
cancer from Agent Orange, right?
Right. Yeah, he got melanoma and then died from liver melanoma. Too young to get a colonoscopy.
Oh, shit.
Well, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But you know, this idea of when I don't think something is real.
Right.
I mean, all the way from God to how that flaming ball of gas in the sky is converting hydrogen into helium.
Yeah.
It's all.
Right.
It's not. Nothing is really that believable.
Yeah.
Until you, and not only when you see something with your own eyes. This is what COVID taught me, is like when you see something with your own eyes, and you hear something, and you are told like not to trust your instincts,
Right.
and don't listen to that. Just listen to whatever the flat screen people are saying.
Yeah.
The people on the flat screens.
Yeah.
All the light coming and bombarding into your retinas.
Right.
Like listen to those people.
Right.
But so I don't have a good answer for why. I mean, there's a mass migration all over.
Yeah.
But I've heard that the Chinese, so 60 Minutes did a report on this
Right.
like a month or
Right.
2 ago. And the largest demographic coming through the southern border, marginally, is Chinese.
It's a little unsettling to think about. And you know, going back to COVID, I think that there's something else that, you know, is in there also, which is just that like we can't say to ourselves that like something is too fantastic to be at this stage in the game. Like very much like the United States. I mean, if you look at the Cold War, for instance, the United States and Russia were eyeing every possible method by which to destroy each other. There were physical ways that we were trying to destroy each other, cultural ways. I mean, some people make a pretty strong assertion that like a lot of the problems that America is having right now culturally have been sewn into the fabric by people who basically came over here from Russia and started movements. I mean, we know that this factually happened before World War II. I mean, hell, Lenin was freed. Was it Lenin, right? Yeah. Or was it Stalin? One of the two was in jail for being basically a Marxist rabble-rouser. And they were freed and sent back to Russia, particularly just to get the gears going again, just to get these labor movement going, because they knew that it would be terrible for the war machines. Like, human beings have been doing stuff like this to each other for a long time. I will say that, like, if we look back at like the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I think it's pretty reasonable and clear why people were coming here. I think a lot of it has to do with, unfortunately, American behavior in Latin America. I mean, like if you read about like the banana republics and backed coups in places, and you know, like maybe I'm channeling my my inner Noam Chomsky here, but I think Chomsky would say that like a lot of these Latin American countries were trying to organize. They were trying to set prices. This was where we got our agricultural goods. This is where we got our natural resources, you know? And so as they started to organize, the United States saw that this was going to jack prices up for us, and they interceded. This isn't conspiracy theory. You can just get on, any reputable site.
Well, I feel like the United States has been doing that all over the
without
world.
a doubt. Like we 100% factually did it in Guatemala, Bolivia, Ecuador, Brazil, Argentina, Panama, all of these places. There were like United States backed coups specifically to upset organizational labor movement. Now, the way that we would put it is they were anti-communist. Well, yeah, they were. But what was the end result of that? It's not like the United States just vehemently hated communism for no reason. We didn't like that it limited our ability to get our hands on cheap natural resources. You could make the argument that that's exactly what Vietnam was about. I mean, Vietnam, by and large, is where Southeast Asia is where the natural resources that were rebuilding a bombed out Japan were coming from.
Right.
And when they tried to organize and set labor costs, we didn't want that. You know? And once again, I'm not poo-pooing this. Like, I really love in America that like I'm not saddled with a bunch of surprises. That gas doesn't fluctuate by like $10 in a week, that, a bunch of bananas doesn't fluctuate by $5 every time I go to the grocery store. I know that now isn't the best economic times, but, as sinister as it sounds, I'm actually pretty thankful for the way that our government has kept an eye on keeping things stable. But it hasn't always been in the best interest of other places. So, if you're a refugee coming here from Guatemala, I get it, man. I get it, and we need immigrants, without a doubt. I think you and I both agree on this. Probably more than anything, just to pay into all the social programs that we're not reproducing enough to keep afloat,
Yeah, there's no doubt that the United States has always needed immigrants, and we continue to need immigrants. Man, I wish you had another zombie dust on.
I got one somewhere. I'll find it. No worries. But but the thing is, Bob, what a mensch. But the thing is now, is when we see people coming into the country that we are separated by an ocean from. This is cause for concern. I don't think that this is a partisan concept. I don't think that like you need to be a Republican or a Democrat to go, I mean, look at what's going on right now in the Biden administration. He's going, we need to pass this bill, right? I agree with you, and so that's, I think, the big concern is that we're staring down this thing that is obviously not great. And, like if things like 9/11 taught us anything, it's that like people here that are not well understood can wreak unbelievable amounts of havoc. The energy grid in particular. And Bob, you help yourself to another one too. Thank you, man. The energy grid in particular scares me to death.
Do you so there's three major energy grids in the continental.
Yeah.
There's essentially Texas by itself. Then you've got the east separated by the Mississippi and the west.
Right.
But none of those, Texas used to boast that it has, super independent and it's got its own energy grid.
Yeah.
But I mean, look what happens when it gets like a little frost on the, those wires go down.
Let me ask you this. How many well-trained guys would it take to take over Quincy? Five.
Five guys.
Yeah, I think so.
How many would it take to take over the United States?
I don't know, but
if there are 340
I think that there's
million,
a big difference between taking over the U.S. and bringing the U.S. to its knees, right? I mean, without power, we're in real trouble. Like you got to think. In my class all the time, we talk a lot about like destabilization events. Like COVID is a great example. But imagine that there was a COVID times 20, right? Are you going to work? I'm not. You know who else isn't going to work? The guys that drive the trucks that bring the food to Hy-Vee. the guys that work the wastewater plant, the guys that, work the coal burning energy plants. They're not going either. The doctors at the hospital, they're not going to be there. So like things can get really bad really quickly, and it doesn't take a lot of people in order to accomplish that. So I think, like, for me personally, I want to look back to the era of 9/11. I don't necessarily want us to crack down more on like American citizens, but I think that we have a responsibility to know who is coming into the country. Who are these people? If automatically by coming into the country, you're not going through the port of entry, it tells me a couple of things about you. Now, I don't want to seem cold. Maybe what it tells me about you is that you're desperate. And I see that. Like I see, as a teacher, like I see kids who have come here that had no other choice but to come here because of poverty and problems and violence where they're from. Man, you are completely welcome, But when I look at a bunch of military age guys from China and the Middle East, I don't think that it's desperation that's pushing you here. I want to know, like maybe you do just want to come here. Maybe you have skills that we need. That's great. But I want to know where you're coming from, and I want to know why you're coming here,
So what's the statistic on the number of migrants that are going to come right through the porous southern border by the end of this year if nothing changes? Do you have any numbers on that?
I don't know.
I think it's somewhere, I think it's north of 8 million.
It's unfathomable.
So going along, everything from San Diego to 60 miles east of San Diego to Eagle Pass, Texas,
right.
All of these places that are absolutely. So here's what's happening. You've got, you mentioned men of military age. Mm-hmm. This idea, if the videos that I'm seeing, if they were orphans, women, children, that's one thing. But when I see thousands
yeah.
of military age men.
Yeah.
And they're all wearing Nike and Adidas.
If you're leaving a place that you have to flee, are you leaving your wife and kids?
Right. No.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah. If I'm leaving a place that I have to flee because of extreme poverty and violence, I'm not leaving my family behind.
What would happen if, can you imagine like an event as big as 9/11 or worse? There's, the amount of people who are coming through, people have talked about, how terrible 9/11 was. And we had like approximately, I don't want to leave anybody out, but approximately 3,000.
3,000. That's
a
round good number. Yeah.
It's a round number.
Yeah.
So you've got,
obviously in the aftermath, it's way more with all the, inhaled particulates and stuff. You probably add a few thousand onto that, but yeah, on the day, about $3,000.
But there are already rumblings on Reddit subthreads of people planning, and I have not gone to the source of these threads,
right.
But people have really wild imaginations, and I don't want to say too much to give people ideas. I don't want to put ideas in people's heads, and I don't want to speak something into the ether and then materialize.
Yeah.
But you've got something like the University of Michigan. They have this huge football stadium called the Big House.
Yeah.
It houses 100,000 people to watch a football game.
Wow.
Okay, and you've got literally people on like Reddit subthreads talking about the possibilities of really bad things happening in places like that.
Right.
And if you've got 8 million people coming through, those 8 million people, they're not all military age.
Yeah,
males.
no, and I think I definitely want to draw the distinction that I believe very much in your tired, your weak, your huddled masses. I do see America as a refuge for that. I think we're strictly talking about the fishiness of so many people of a certain age and gender from places that we are separated by oceans from. How the hell did you get to South America? How did you get to Central America? How did you get to Mexico? What is facilitating this?
Somebody. So it goes back to this idea of the unbelievable. It's like there's no way there's no way that the sun can fuse hydrogen into
Yeah,
helium
yeah.
and the light gets to our eyes in 8
Yes.
minutes, and then it flips upside down in our eyes
Right.
and moves to the optic nerves through the fovea centralis,
Right.
and then it creates a picture in the back of our minds, and then we can talk about it. There's no way.
Good explanation.
There's no way that the most ridiculous things could happen.
Right.
But you know what's happening?
Yeah.
People from China are arriving in Ecuador.
Yeah.
Somehow. Somebody is taking them there.
Right. Right.
But here's the thing.
Also, let's not act like China is a third world country. Like China's okay.
China, I mean, ironically, so do you know the number of actual poverty of poor in China is the same population as the entire United States?
Really?
Yeah. So like China is not known as a third world country. That is true. They are part of the BRICS.
Yeah.
Like Brazil, Russia, India, China. They're the BRIC countries.
Yeah.
They're number 2 in GDP.
Yeah.
And they could be number 1 maybe someday. But the point is, to your point, it's not Guatemala.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
It's not Bangalore.
Yeah.
It's a very well funded. They can pretty much do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
China has enormous power.
Which, by the way, Guatemala, like the United Fruit Company in Guatemala was basically it's basically Chiquita Banana today. This was a huge agricultural American-owned conglomerate that basically the people started fighting back against, and the CIA went in and, put that thing down.
Yeah.
Just to put it in perspective. But if you're a Guatemalan and you're fleeing an impoverished situation, that's one thing. But I think here's where we've got sideways on all of it. Is that this idea that we're talking about has become so politicized. And I think about it, just talking about it right now, I'm thinking to myself, am I saying anything that's going to get me in trouble? I'm a public school teacher. Is this going to be a problem tomorrow? I don't think so. But at the end of the day, the only thing that would get me in trouble is that this has become such a highly politicized topic that the truth of how we should be viewing this is out the window.
Well, let me ask you this.
It's federal law that if you want to enter this country, you have to go through the port of entry.
You have to.
It's federal law, right? If I broke federal law, I'd be out of job, right? Why does no one else have to do this? How can you commit a felony entering the country and that's okay? I don't get it.
I mean, we're talking about currently unvaxxed, unemployed felons.
The unvaxxed is a big thing for me.
Felons.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're going to try to make certain Americans lose their jobs.
Yeah.
But they're going to let those people come through, which, by the way, for you to ask the question, you've said nothing today that would warrant any kind of
I would think
hellfire.
not. It's just such a weird world now.
But are you allowed to ask, how did the Chinese person, because, I mean, how did that Chinese person get to Ecuador?
Yeah.
And who brought that person through the Darien Gap, up through Panama, and all the way up through Central America, and
also,
then
it's not like we're not talking. We don't care that you're ethnically Chinese. I care that you're politically Chinese. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Our countries don't get along.
Absolutely.
Right?
If you're a CCP sympathizer, that could possibly be a problem.
Right.
Well,
or if you're sent here specifically by the government, I mean, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, during the Cold War, there were Soviet sleeper cells in America. They never had cause or were given directives to activate, but there were without a doubt Soviet sleeper cells. We know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there were Islamic extremist sleeper cells in America that did activate, and that caused 9/11. So I think our concern is, are we allowing the entrance to the country of future sleeper cells? Because quite frankly, it's not a matter of if there will be another terrorist attack on American soil. It's a matter of when. And if you believe anything else, then you're deluded.
Maybe the Fed needs a crisis like that.
I'm not going there. But
I will tell you this, though.
Yeah.
I will tell you this right now. I would argue that the feds. I'm talking about the feds. I'm not talking about state governments.
Yeah, I got you.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm saying though, with the January 6th thing.
Yeah.
Okay. There were when the FBI was under oath, and they were directly asked, were any of your people there? You know what they said? I cannot answer that question.
Right.
And they were asked it a dozen times, and they said they cannot answer. You know why? Because they probably – so the accusation is that there were 500 FBI people on January 6th.
Right.
Here's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
If the FBI needed to build a January 6th kind of crisis,
Right.
if the world needed a COVID crisis, if 9/11 was needed, I mean, going back to 9/11, by the way, years ago, if you and I were talking like this, that's conspiracy theory.
Right.
I'm not talking about this in the conspiracy. I'm saying right in front of our faces today, it is known that we figured out that all of the people who were attacking us on 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia.
Right.
All of them.
Right.
All of them.
Yeah.
But we never attacked Saudi Arabia.
Isn't that a huge part of like this sort of zeitgeist that's going on today against academia, against just intellectual thought in general, is that we've reached this stage in the game where the simple act of just discussing things is so heavily vilified.
Well, are we
You know, like
allowed
I've
to-
got to shy off all these different topics because I'm afraid of social ramifications. But, you know, I think in previous generations that wouldn't have been the case. I think that as information travels more easily these days via the internet, that there's had to be a crackdown on these sort of free speech forums like we're doing right now. You know, there has to be built against something like this some sort of repercussion. Otherwise, people could just get together in rooms and talk about whatever they want. And that's not great if you're trying to wag the dog, you know?
Well, I just want to know why, when these migrants are coming through the border, they're thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions coming.
Millions upon millions.
Millions upon millions.
Yeah.
Why is the Border Patrol, they're ordered to stand down and watch as the migrant takes their passports and their papers and throws them into the bushes, crawls right through the hole. I mean, anybody who wants to find these videos can find them.
Sure.
Good luck finding them on YouTube.
Yeah.
But they're everywhere else. They're on Rumble. They're in all of the freer societies. They're all over Twitter,
Right.
known as X. You can go and find these videos everywhere.
You know what's sad is if I want to look up something even remotely salacious, I don't even bother going to Google anymore. Isn't that a sad state of affairs? That I just know that if I want a dissenting opinion on something, that Google is not even an option for me to go to.
Mike.
Same thing with YouTube and yeah.
Mike, you're a history teacher.
Yeah.
Do you know what Gemini is? It's Google's AI machine.
Oh,
Okay. So AI
Yeah.
is a pretty big thing right now,
Right.
but we're just barely scratching the tip of the iceberg here,
Yeah.
or scratching
Terrifying.
the surface. So do you know, so to your point about why you would not want to go to Google, is because Google is no longer the actual authority.
Right.
Okay. Because, so did you hear about what happens if you ask Google's AI, Gemini? Do you know about what happens if you say, show me pictures of the founding fathers?
I have heard that Google's AI machine is extremely woke, for lack of a better term,
That's-
to the point of denying reality, I guess, is for lack of a better term.
It's completely denying reality,
Yeah.
and is the people who are in charge of making that woke are the same people saying that others are supplying misinformation,
Right, right.
which is, this is always a do as I say, don't do as I do.
And-
all of these things.
And, you know, information wars are obviously nothing new, you know, but like the way that this game is played now is extra scary because, I mean, there are definitive places that everybody goes for information. I mean, like, if I wanted to look something up on the internet, I wouldn't even say look it up on the internet. I'd say Google it.
Right.
You know, so for something like that to be captured And I mean, and I went through a lot of this, like in searching for information, like during COVID, for instance, trying to find good sources of information and just finding out that like so much of what was being said, and I'm just talking for my own safety and my own decision making, and is it safe to do this? Is it safe to do that? What's the scoop on the vaccine? Like all of that, to as you realize that information is as captured as it is, it's kind of terrifying. And then, like I've been saying all along, just the politicization of being able to have open conversations without fear of retribution. Like that when I come on here, I have to be worried that, professionally and even socially, that there might be retribution because people don't like what I say, and then they can attack that. It's a scary thing.
Well, I mean, you're allowed to ask a question.
I think so.
And if the consensus, all of the things that you talked about today, I was trying to look for you inserting your opinion into something, and I think you 99% did not do that today.
Yeah.
So
a little bit maybe, but
here and there, but I mean very kind of towed the line and kind of went neutral and
I think
didn't.
Most of what I said is pretty easily looked up, pretty easily verified. Mm-hmm. There are sources for all of this. They're good sources. So yeah, I mean, like.
But that's where the fear comes in, because the
sure.
good sources don't mean anything sometimes. And just because you can look it up, and just because it's in front of your face.
They very well might not. Yeah.
Right. And just because we're all expected to ignore our eyes and ignore our ears and
that's
just
where we're at.
Listen, it's a very scary time.
Thing that's going on right now. The sort of like ignoring of something that can be right in front of your face.
And to close up the pod, what else is very scary?
Yeah.
Colon cancer.
Thank you.
So
I will get one. Yeah.
So I will tell you.
I haven't had a physical in, 13 years maybe, so I should probably go.
I mean, especially with this raspy voice, this could be leading to something else.
Yeah.
No,
we got a gig this weekend too, so it's
I
don't think I'm going to be singing. We're playing at the Unitarian Church. They do these cool, like, Gypsy Tango Foxtrot is my band. They do these cool, like, dinners, and then they'll have, like, a musical act. And it's crazy. I actually played one just by myself. This has been a couple of years back, but these guys are great. They eat dinner, and then they just sit in the pews, and they just watch you. They just watch and listen, which is really bizarre if you're used to playing, like, Quincy bars,
Yeah.
Because you're just kind of background music there, which is fine. But, like, they'll just sit there and, yeah.
But you know what's interesting? So the last time that you played at Spring Street, I got there really early to make sure I had like a front row seat because I want to make sure that I can see everybody in your band. But those people who sit front and center, that's exactly, no one's sitting there talking to each other.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're Hagenbomber who won't shut up. It's like, dude, Megan Peters is playing. She's singing. Will you shush your face? But anyway, you're very talented. I was very happy to see you play the last 2 or 3 times.
Hey, thanks, man.
And get a colonoscopy because you're a couple years younger than me.
Yeah.
I'm 47 going in tomorrow.
44.
Yeah. And I will tell you, the great Hank Rashar said that there was somebody close. That passed away.
In Lawrence, yeah.
And I will tell you, at my day job, we had a chemical maker that was probably one of the best employees that we ever had, one of the best friends we ever had, one of the best coworkers we ever had, and he died last week from colon cancer.
Oh, jeez.
And I'll tell you, one of the reasons why I made the appointment was because last year when he got diagnosed, it was looking really bad, but he thought he was kind of coming out of it.
Yeah.
But then 3 or 4 months ago, it was still there. He's getting, it was very bad. So get a colonoscopy.
I will, I swear it.
Because if you get one now, then you can think to yourself, because by the way.
You got 10 years, right?
By the way, you got 10 years.
Yeah.
And like once you get cleared, you know that things are looking good. Things are good. But
I feel all right about it.
Hey, thanks so much.
Dude, good luck.
Really
good luck
appreciate it.
tomorrow. I'm sure it'll
Thank
be great.
you.
Call me if you need anything.
All right. I might call you all whacked
need a
out.
ride or
Hey,
something.
take me to Maidrite.
All right.